Hey guys, welcome to Still Stoked. I have got a good friend here called Troy, who has been my yoga teacher for about 10 years. And we've been surfing our little arms off this last week, and I wanted to talk to him a bit about what muscles we use and how yoga, especially yin, and doing more vinyasa, stronger yang practice, can help both strengthen our bodies for surfing, but also relax them and help all of our fascia.
Cool.
So over to you, Troy. What do you
Okay.
think?
A lot. So we've had quite a few days of really good swell, obviously, and one of the things that comes up when you have a big day or a big swell that comes through and you haven't had a lot of big waves is paddling, right? And so arms, we talk about like noodle arms, you talk about this, fatiguing in the arms. A lot of things, paddle strength is one thing. Big waves and duck diving, I think, is one of the other ones. Like you were saying today, your triceps.
This is so sore just to touch.
Yeah. And so you think paddling, when you're paddling, there's so many different factors that come into paddling. Essentially, you're reaching and it's pull strength. You're reaching and it's pull strength. But as we fatigue and we kind of just get, we used to call it kind of the crab. Yeah. So as your head drops down, you start to get, and then it's like you're getting this weird extension through your shoulders that just you're starting to feel. I call it the knife in the back. And so there's.
Like here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you start to get this pain, and then then the mind gets into it. So that we'll go over. But another thing, like I said, duck diving. If you think of it, you're taking a board, and if you're on a bigger day, you're having more leaderage, which means to sink it. It's going to cost you a bit more effort. And in the sinking, this pushing of a buoyant force down into the water, it's like you're really, really working into the triceps to straighten and get it down. Yeah. And you're trying to hold it, and your core strength. It's funny you don't think of all these things that happen, but you got core strength, you got arm strength, you got shoulder strength, and then to pull it back up, the scoop. There's I think I remember seeing. Was it John or Jamie like a few years ago, they were talking about the 45 degrees, like when you're duck diving. So that's a thing to consider as well.
Like that's, to anyone who doesn't know that's like slightly tilting your board, especially on bigger waves and you have a bigger board, slightly tilting like one rail down. So you're not pushing a flat surface into the water, but you're tilting it and you can kind of get it and knife it in a bit better.
I think especially in bigger days too, because like I said, when you have more leaderage, like if you're surfing a short board and you got a paper thin board, it's pretty easy to just plane it and get it down. But if you've got a thicker board, you're going to be fighting against buoyancy, and all you got to do is just tilt it 45 degrees, and it's amazing how you can just scoop it under and get so much more depth.
Yeah.
So there's so many things we could talk about. I think one is obviously technique. The better you can get yourself deep into the water, the less effort you're exerting, the less you're going to feel sore from that. But when it gets down to it, if the waves are good, you're surfing until you can't, right? Yeah. And that's what we've essentially done the last few days. I mean, I don't know how long we've been surfing, but I'm tired.
Today I couldn't surf. I'm not going to be able to surf this afternoon again. I'm so cooked.
Yeah, I mean, and I just woke up from a nap because I went home and just laid down for a second and then got up an hour and a half later. So that's the arms. The arms are obviously working. So there's stuff you can do for paddle fitness. Sadly, one of the things I've found in surfing is there's really no training for paddling, but paddling. But stretching can help. A lot of yin stuff. A lot of conditioning stuff can keep you just mobile. So that's good. Core strength, again, there's a lot of core stuff that we won't get into here, but you can do core mobility drills, core training, core strengthening, all that stuff helps because you obviously want to be staunch on your feet. Legs, legs are things that if you're getting a lot of waves, which it's funny, I was doing the calculations, like we live in Manly Beach and the waves are okay. A lot of times you're lucky if you get, like a pump and maybe a turn.
It's like a grovelly beachy.
Yeah.
And occasionally we get like a nice wall, but it's very occasionally. And then there'll be like 600 people on it.
Yeah. And if you think of it, but it's funny how I was doing the math in my head. And if you think, let's say we're just going to go surf for an hour, right?
Yeah.
And if you're lucky and there's not 600 people on it, you're getting, let's call it 10 waves. Now, if you are really, really lucky and each wave is 6 seconds, that's get the wave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's maybe get the wave, get up, pump, maybe a turn, maybe 2 turns, right? And so that's 6 seconds on a wave, which in Manly sometimes is just get it, pump, hope you get a turn, and that's it, or pull into a closeout barrel. So in an hour, you're only actually surfing for about a minute, which is so interesting because we're talking about the legs, and you want to have kind of this recoil, but the legs get cold, so there's things you can do while you're on the board. There's, muscles. We've been talking a lot about hip flexors and such. A lot of us are, sitting a lot more, and we have tightness in the hips, and you want to have this recoil, this kind of cat-like springiness in your legs to be able to bounce, jump, and get all around the waves. But we'll do some stuff later that will stretch out. Hip flexors are a big one. Quads, we've been doing the smooth star skating.
Yeah.
Those things are epic.
The smooth star surf trainer is like one of the best possible things that you can do out of the water for your surfing.
Yeah.
Hands down, 100%.
It's epic, and it's I've only really just gotten into it, which is amazing. But yeah, like 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes on it, and your legs are already burning. So it's really good prime. It's really good training. A thing that I want to focus on as well that we'll get into is your posture and paddling. Like I said, the back, so your neck, the way we use our neck, a lot of us get this kind of crink in the neck. And a lot of us get this in like I teach yoga, and you see a lot of people just do this a lot. And we want to arch the back, but we go where it's easy. So chin lifts, and we just get this crunching into the neck versus actually finding a fuller extension and opening through the chest. And I always think of it, if you can get really good in a cobra pose, which is, the Bhujangasana, the cobra pose we use in yoga. If you think of that when you're paddling, it actually changes the muscles you use while you're paddling. So if you're laying flat on your belly and you're just reaching, you have to extend your arm, and you're using your lats to pull, and you're getting you're getting a bit of pulling down. But if you arch your back, you can get a little bit more of it's like a swatting down, and you get a bit more of pec work, and you can add a bit more of the
increases the angle to the water as well, right? So you can go deeper rather than just like kind of across and stroke it. Yeah,
but and this is the thing too, is I remember, I don't remember when it would have been. Somebody, I can't remember who it was, and I'll think about it, but they were talking about, they got into, I think it was Tim Ferriss actually, many years ago. He was doing all the self-experiments, and he talked about how he went in to train himself to be a competitive swimmer, just for fun. And what he was talking about is, in swimming, you think you want to have the full stroke. So when you're paddling, you think you want to reach as far as you can and pull as far as you can. But actually, the best plan of attack is 45 degrees down, pull to about just behind your shoulder, and come up. So you're going 45 degrees, pull behind your shoulder, come up. And so you're getting this explosive pull here, and that's where all the power comes from. And then it's a quick pull out, it's a smooth pull in. It seems silly, but it's even little things like when you're paddling, having a straight arm pulling down, or if anybody's ever done competitive swimming, like I swam in high school, and I remember when, you're not just swatting the water, but you're kind of doing a little under the board thing, and it gives you this little push. It keeps you more, there's more projection, little things of even how you're using your hand. We think like a hard hand will give you better paddle. Not true. You want a little bit more loose. So there's all these little things where you feel like, okay, the muscles have to be trained. But the main thing I find is that if you're gonna have long marathon sessions, you gotta be paddle fit, and you have to have posture fit. And it's training yourself to have a good posture, where if we're normally slumping, as I said, to arch and lift up. Like let's say I'm on my board and I have a rounded, slump back, I'm gonna look forward and I'm gonna be pinching. I'm just doing this now and my neck hurts, versus lifting the chest forward, arching, and it causes me, I have to engage into my upper back a bit more. But if I can brace that, then this it's just like I'm pushing and pushing and I'm pushing the waves down, and it changes the muscles you're using.
It's super interesting, like when you look at other people surfing and paddling in the surf, you can tell people that are experienced surfers and people that are starting, just in the way that they are arching their back, like the way that they do a really good cobra on their surfboard, and that they're actually like wanting to get somewhere rather than just lying on a board and kind of straight in the water.
Yeah, and you can see, and another thing too is it's funny because you see some people who have just developed patterns. Like a lot of people don't think about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a terrible paddler.
But you're successful. Like you can still paddle.
Sometimes.
But this is the thing.
Got a black eye.
Yeah. Well, it's not paddling related though, unless you just paddled and slap yourself in the face.
Who knows?
But you've seen like I've seen guys that have been surfing their whole life, and they've just gotten used to having, moderate, like decent paddle, form, and they just go, okay, well, screw it. This is how I'm going to paddle. And also, I think as humans, I know I am, and I know a lot of people in my line of work, is that we're really good at just dealing with pain and issues. So we'll notice things like, I'm guilty as anybody. I get the burn. I had a fractured vertebra 12 years ago, something like that. And I never really did anything about it. And so it's caused a lot of muscle anomalies, right?
Yeah.
And so on my right side in particular, I have to really be aware of, if I'm letting myself do that, I just get this horrible pain. But we tend to just kind of go, that's just the way it is, versus doing something about it. If I arch, I can have it where it feels like a knife in my upper back. And I remind myself, practice what you preach. Boom, come into that cobra shape, gone.
Right.
Cost me a bit of, and this is the thing I always stress in this stuff, in classes and whatever, is that it's like an investment. You have to invest a little bit more at the onset. And what I mean by that is you have to work to refine your form to start the paddle. But if you do that, then the result is going to be a lot better down. And the example I give is, let's say I want to go get a meal, right? I could easily go to McDonald's and spend $5 or, and get 2 cheeseburgers, I don't know, whatever it costs these days. Like the point is I can spend less money and get lots of food, but the quality is not necessarily there. So on the onset, I'm expending less energy, money, but the fallback is that it's going to not cause me any good repercussions, versus if I go and I buy the ingredients to create my own burger. If I'm just talking about a burger, organic meat, organic veggies, all that stuff, really well-baked bun, it's going to cost me a little bit on the onset, but the quality of energy I'm going to get is going to be so much better. And that for me is, if you invest in the shape that you're going to paddle with, you'll do less later, and it just takes time to train your posture, and then it just becomes second nature and you don't feel those pains anymore.
So in yoga then, what positions are really good for people to pay attention to?
Well, as I said, cobra, like an arched back, like prone, like laying on your belly and arching your back, strengthening the back line of your body.
And Pilates is also good.
Pilates is great. Yeah, Pilates is great because Pilates does finite movements, and what Pilates does, and yoga can do, but you have to be really, really vigilant and you have to be a good student. But Pilates is explicit about it, is that they do a lot of micro movements that get, we call them sometimes the intrinsic movers. So that your spine, for example, has, you see somebody who's jacked in their spine and they have these big, usually big lats, they kind of big traps, and you see a couple muscles, but those are the top level.
Yeah.
And so those are the big movers. Your lats do all that pulling, so lats are going to be big if you're paddling.
Down triangle people.
Yeah, that's why again you see swimmers, they're like triangles, right? But if you think you have all these little muscles, like some are super super short, like 1 to 2 vertebrae long, and they do a lot of the just stabilizing, and that's when you do Pilates. And if you're doing yoga well, you create like a better bracing around your spine.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff different ways you can cue yourself, or just noticing where you're putting the effort. As I said, I think body awareness is a thing. I see people all the time in classes where you say, okay, hold this part still, but move this part. And we just don't have the body awareness to do that. So one of the things that will work out, when we come into it here, is just getting you to understand what it feels like when you're bracing one part and just moving one joint. And we'll do some mobility stuff that gets you to understand what does it feel like when one joint's moving versus just moving the whole body. Poses wise, lunges, like we come into legs, because you do, like I said, surfing is going to be, it's funny, surfing is actually a very small portion of surfing, but you want to be prepared, and practice and preparation is so that when it comes to battle or whatever you want to call it, you feel confident in your equipment. And this is the way I look at it. You'll tune your car. If I said, hey, let's go drive over to the West Coast, which for those of you who don't know, it's probably, 3 days? Yeah, something like that. We'd probably go, okay, let me take my car to the shop. Let me tune it up. Let me make sure all the fluids are good. Make sure it's all lubed, everything. We want to make sure tires, like you check. But we go, oh, surf's gonna be big. Cool, I'll get my big board out.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how's the car going? How's the vehicle? Have you tuned yourself? And so a lot of the things is pregame.
Yeah.
It's preparation. Even like, in setting up, you set up a shoot, there's the pregame, and then you just hit record.
Yeah.
When you're surfing, you want to feel, and this has been really a big focus of mine lately, is that you want to feel confident in your equipment. And I just came off of a knee injury. I still have the kind of shaved knee to prove it, which looks pretty damn good. But that's one of the things I did a lot of strengthening work to get it back into fitness. Yeah. And that's, if you think of it, floaters are a big one, right? Floaters jumping off and landing, you want to feel confident in your equipment. And I've had a lot of friends who come off knee injuries, they go to float off and they just jump and kick their board away. Surfing's the same thing though. Like, we were training the other day on the Smooth Star to just get a little front side release on the tail. And the idea is you want to develop that muscle memory so that you feel confident on a skateboard, that when you're in the water, on the skateboard, you have time after time after time after time, same wave. On the wave, you get one shot, and you want to see that section and feel that you're confident, like, yeah, I know my equipment can do this. All I got to do is that thing that I've done. And so it's just training yourself. So with poses, I was saying so I kind of got distracted, but with hips and lunges and things, you want to train your body so you feel at least like, okay, my body's feeling limber, my body's feeling strong. I'm confident in its ability. And for me, I think the mental quality of it as well, when you're confident in your ability, you're confident in your equipment's ability, your equipment will actually go farther for you, which is a really interesting psychosomatic concept. But I feel, and I've just noticed this in self-diagnosis and talking to friends and such too, is that a lot of what holds us back is the lack of belief. Airs, for example. It's like, I don't even think I can do it. Well, then you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Roundhouse cutback. It's like, I don't think I can do it. Well, no, you're not going to do it.
The surf's too big. I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
So you didn't even give it a try.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're, and if you train and you're vigilant, as I said, if you invest the effort when you're on, on the mat, like this is a very fluffy, this is a very static environment. So this is not changing. And the way I teach and the way I look at yoga is that yoga is a controlled stress experiment or a controlled stress environment. Because I'm saying, here's the formation of the shape. Now you put yourself into that shape. And so if you come into, a fold, right? I just want to come into a forward fold. I can kind of go like, yeah, that's pretty good. And that feels kind of comfy or goodish. And I'll get a little bit of benefit, but more or less I'll just come out as I came. Or I go, okay, let's see if I can tune it up a little bit. I want to train myself to be able to deal with stress. I engage a few things, I push a little bit. Now I feel a lot more in the actual stretch. And so I'm physiologically and psychologically training myself to accept stress and stay with it, breathe through it, and then I'm more likely to be able to deal with stress that is beyond my control when I get out into the real world, the surf, etc. So we kind of got onto a little bit of a tangent there.
Kelly Slater and Mick Fanning and a lot of those surfers probably about 10 years ago started talking about yoga for surfing particularly to do with conditioning, body conditioning and mobility. So how can yoga help surfers in those areas?
Yeah, totally. I think Kelly's kind of a hard example because he's just got a freakish body.
Yeah,
I don't know, when was it in the 90s when he was on in the surfer article and he was just bent in half backwards. Like he's just got a freakish body. But Mick's a really good example. Mick came off of a hamstring injury to come back and win his first world title. It's amazing. He's got a
huge injury. Yeah,
but he's got a weapon of a mind and he's got determination and focus. Not all of us have that. We can develop it. One thing, when it comes to yoga, and yoga is a very broad definition. The physical side of it is one portion, and I think that's what we're going to focus on a little bit here. But the mind, you can't have just the physical without the mental. The way you're interacting with your body is crucial. But as I said, if I start, I love watching the live comps. I've been watching live comps since I realized you could live stream. It's epic, right? And when you're at work and you're sitting at your desk and you kind of just have that tab open, and you're sort of like, yeah, I'm typing, and you kind of go back and you're like, oh, okay, what did I just type? But yeah, screw it. But you see people, stretching. It's just like. And I remember seeing years ago, people were just stretching and you kind of go, wow, that's not really giving you any value. And it's interesting, it's changed now because there's been such a competitive mindset. People have hired coaches, and stretching and conditioning and creating mobility, mobility is the potential for being able to move your body. So, a layback, for example, if I'm gonna get a layback, I'm gonna extend my back leg, I'm gonna literally lay back. And the only way I'm going to come up, I can hope that momentum brings me up. Yeah. But you see the guys that get really, really extended, and how do they come up? Strong core that pulls them back up, and it's that quick recoil. Yeah. And so it's training yourself to have not just the range, and this is something that's been coming up a lot more in yoga lately, is it's not just stretching passively, but you're actively putting yourself there. Like if I can grab your arm and put you to a range, that's great. But if you can't go that far, then you don't have ownership over that range. And the idea is that you want to feel that you have, again, it goes back to the equipment. You want to feel that you have ownership over the full range of your body. And so yoga, if practiced in a mindful, strong manner, you can actually open up new space in your body that is usable space. And you think of things, as I said, let's say you want to, let's say you're going to hit the lip and then it starts to pitch. Well, you kind of have to get this springiness to get up. And so you're going to need to have off of a bottom turn, come up, hug the knees in, get your feet there, and so you're gonna have to have your brain mapping understand that you have the the range, I guess, and the flexibility to do that, as well as the muscle control to get you into that.
Yeah.
A lot of us are tight, and it's not because we're tight, it's just because we have, we haven't actually worked on flexibility. It's actually, when I started teaching 12 years ago, I started teaching with just friends because I wanted to get, kind of get my chops. And I bribed them. I said, listen, if we do a class, basically I said, hey, let's go for a surf on Saturday. And I said, if you will just do a class with me for an hour and a half, I'll buy you a brekkie burrito afterwards, right? So
we were Californian.
Yeah, it was epic. But I mean, it was pretty cool because we would sit on this grass headland and just watch the waves before we jumped in. And we'd do an hour and a half of strong power vinyasa class, right? Like a lot of flowing with breath. And one of my friends who came, he was a friend from high school, and there was only like 3 of us. And the second week I was just like, so how do you feel afterwards? And he just goes, what do you think? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, dude, that's the first time I've been able to sit cross-legged in like 7 years. 7 years, 1 class. And so the idea was, your brain is such an amazing plastic thing that if we don't sit cross-legged, for example, we don't see that there's a need for us to sit cross-legged. Therefore, we don't assign any bandwidth to being able to sit cross-legged. If we start to open up the legs, one 90-minute class changed his whole architecture. I'm stoked for him. He's continued to practice every day since then. But the point of it is that if you are working and stretching and you're owning your range, you can create new range. Some of us, like, injuries, this comes up all the time too. Like if you have injuries and you have fusions and such, there's only so much range you can reclaim.
Yeah, like I've had my shoulder reconstructed.
Yeah.
And I can't get it past there, right?
Yeah. But you can look at that and we can kind of go, okay, we'd have to know what the construction looked like, how long ago it was, because even in that process, I remember I was working with a girl, we were at a climbing gym a few years ago when I was living in Melbourne, and she had a total shoulder reco, and we were laying on the ground, and she was like, yeah, I'm like, let me see, what's your rotation? She's like, yeah, that's as far as I can go. And I went, really? And I went, cool. And I held her and I did breathing work with her, and in 5 breaths, I got her to go all the way down to the ground.
Yeah.
And she was just like, oh my God, I didn't.
Muscles are like.
Yeah. Well, but you have all the tissues too. But again, there's the belief that doesn't go there. And she had kind of gone like, yeah, I've just been stuck here for like 3 years. 5 breaths, she went all the way down, and it changed her whole perspective on it because now she had her range back and she owned that range. So that was, it's really cool what you can do. But even that example there, what actually did it? Was
mindful movement?
Mindful movement, breathing. It wasn't me, like I wasn't pushing her. I had a consistent force. Yeah. I asked her to work. It recruited muscles. Frozen shoulder is a huge thing. Shoulder surgery is a huge thing. Knee reconstructions. Yeah.
3 knee surgeries, shoulder reco, arthritis in neck, SI injury.
Snowboarding.
Massive shoulder, ankle injuries.
But you're still surfing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But through doing yoga since I was 16, I believe personally that I would be in a lot, I've done yoga for 20 years pretty solidly. I'd be in a lot worse state, I believe,
for sure,
if I don't have that flexibility, that mobility, and that like mindful dedication to working through like my range and bringing that range back after so many surgeries.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say 2 things to that. One is just the caveat is that, like, for anybody watching, you don't have to have 20 years to have that kind of result. No. And the idea is, what do they say? The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. It's like plant the tree. But second, I would ask is like, what have you found has been the biggest benefit that you've gotten from yoga with related, like, because you froth all the time, you're in board sports, you're action all the time, right? So for you to be out of action, it will drive you mentally nuts.
Yeah.
And so for you, it's a tool that keeps you in your lifestyle. So like, what have you found has been the biggest benefit, I guess, of the practice? Has it been the stretching? Has it been the mindfulness? Like, what have you found?
My mindful yin, I always love when I'm injured. Mindfulness and just mindful movement, but slow, like hatha. Yeah,
slow.
Slow movement, controlled. And for me, I'm like really curious with my body, so I don't like to feel imbalances, or if I like to understand the imbalances. I like to notice the imbalances. So then I then have a project. So I think like slow hatha and yin gives me that mindfulness when I'm injured, for sure.
And that's one of the biggest things I appreciate of yoga over a lot of other physical forms of work is that, let's say you have, like, there's nothing wrong with any of them, but if you go to the gym and you look at the gym, what do you see? You see a lot of people doing workouts, headphones in, TVs on. What do I want? I want my arms to get bigger. So I load it up with weight and I put on something, and I don't want to focus on it. I'm just counting 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, like, okay, cool. And I feel the burn, but I don't want to have to, invest in that. I just want to feel like, yeah, cool. Whereas in yoga, the idea is you do it once, but you feel and you go, wow, that's strong. Like, and you the whole idea is that you want to get to know, like, wow, I suck here. And so, even understanding the way your body moves, like with the biceps, an easy one to kind of show this stuff is that when you think of strength, right? In all of your muscles, you sort of have a bell curve of strength. And at halfway, like, this is where I'm going to be strongest. So if you gave me whatever, let's say I could, hold 100 kilos for argument's sake with my bicep, right? This is where I could hold that the easiest. As soon as I start to straighten my arm, I start to lose strength until I get towards just straight, and that's where I'm at pretty much the weakest. Similarly, if I go the opposite way, I start to lose strength, and then here I have a lot less strength than I do here. Yoga trains you at end range if you're doing the work. And this is what I keep saying is just, I don't like to really use the term stretching because a lot of people want to do stretching. Even like yin is a more fascial release, and that is a bit of stretching, but mild. With yoga, the idea is you come into a deep stretch and then you engage those muscles because you're training yourself to understand that you, as I keep saying, is like you own that range and that you have control over that range and you're mobile instead of just being flexible. And I think like you said, it's just if you have a mindfulness about how your body's moving, you also have a relationship to healing, to creating new range, to stretching and all that jazz, and it becomes a really beautiful practice.
Yeah. Nice. So you're gonna take me through what you do mobility-wise in the morning when you first wake up, just to get all your joints moving, getting ready to go out for a surf. I do some swings to get my hips, but I never really spend much time. I go from cold straight to the ocean pretty much most of the time, so we'll talk a little bit about little warm-ups and movement that you can do on the beach as well. And then we have a swell coming this weekend, and I am cooked. Like, that just hurt me with my arm just now. And I'd like you to take us through like a half an hour, like juicy yin shoulders, all of the muscles that are just fatigued from surfing too much.
Cool. Cool. Awesome.
Cool. All right. So we'll do that in another video, which you'll be able to see in this whole chain of things. Sweet. Thanks,
cool.
Troy.
Pleasure.